Hello, and welcome to Reel Film Snobs. I'm Angela Yeager. I'm pleased to have with me on the show, and it's been a while, my good friend Brian Hart. Welcome to the show, Brian.
Hey, thanks for having me again.
Yeah, I don't think I've had you on this year, actually. And have you been on in 2025? I don't think you came on for Sundance because I was ticked off at them.
Yeah, rightly so.
Maybe next year though. Next year I'll get over it. But we're here for a different reason, although related to Sundance. We're here
Yep.
for the tribute to Robert Redford, who recently passed away, which is very sad. Although, he lived a good long life. For
Yeah.
a celebrity to make it to 89, that's a big deal.
Yeah,
Because
for sure.
they tend to live large. So, and unfortunately, unlike his buddy Paul Newman, who did not make it as long, but because of actually this was your idea to do the tribute, and I thought it was a great idea. You've been volunteering at Sundance for what, 25 years? Am I
It's
getting
I think next year's my 22nd, I believe.
22nd? Okay,
Yeah.
so more than 20 years you've been
Yeah.
volunteering, working at Sundance as well as seeing films. You've had an opportunity to meet the great man. So we're going to talk about Robert Redford and his legacy. Unlike some folks where we focus on just their direction or just their acting, Robert Redford was a man of many talents, and so we're going to focus on three aspects of his career. First, starting off with his legacy with the Sundance Film Festival and the Sundance Film Institute, which I think is almost just as important, and then go into Robert Redford as director, because he also directed movies, and then Robert Redford as actor. And so I think you're going to kick us off here by talking about Robert Redford and Sundance.
Yeah. Again, thanks for having me. It's gonna be it's this is the emotional one, and I don't usually get emotional when celebrities pass away. But this one hit me pretty hard because of, what he did for Sundance and what a big part of that was for my life. And it still is. So like you said, he founded in '81. He founded the Sundance Institute, and so that was kind of the first thing he did. He wanted to give a voice to people that wanted to make films that weren't just in that Hollywood kind of cycle where you had to be rich and privileged and kind of, part of the system. So he started this institute, and then I think it was '85, then he started the Sundance Film Festival in Utah. And so last year was the 40th anniversary. And this is, given a platform and kind of changed cinema. There are other film festivals, but this is one of the first ones that really gave a voice, and it started careers like Tarantino, Soderbergh, the Coen Brothers, so many more. There's, I say a
Oh,
few.
wow.
There's like thousands of people that and actors and directors alike, and it was really important to him too. He wasn't doing this for money. Sundance Institute's a nonprofit. I believe the whole film festival is run as a nonprofit, and it's not. It makes money, obviously, although some years it does lose money as well. But it's to give this voice, and I think even in his films and his some of the films we're going to be talking about, he likes to give voices to people that just wouldn't normally get it, and I really think that kind of is his legacy, standing up for people, showing kind of everyday life, humanizing things, even the bad parts. And we'll go into some of that as well. So, yeah, great
Did you
guy.
did you have time over your 22 years at Sundance to interact with him directly ever, or what were your impressions of him having met him?
Yeah, I did. I have two stories that stand out. I'll try to tell really quickly. The first one, maybe I'll give it to Brad so he can throw up the picture. He would go to a press conference at our theater every year to kick off the festival. And sometimes we would help. like supplement his security essentially. And there's this great picture of him right next to me, and I blinked or something, but it looks like I'm sleeping while I'm like standing up, protecting Robert Redford,
Sleeping
sleeping
on
at
the
the job.
job. That sounds about right for you, actually.
Yeah,
And you're
yeah,
known for sleeping.
yeah, that's true. I sleep during a lot of films. Why not sleep during security detail of one of the biggest icons in film history? And then there was another one where there was Kenneth Cole, currently and for the last, I don't know, 10 or 15 years, donates the jacket for the volunteers. And they want to do a big volunteer picture of everybody in front of the Egyptian theater. It's the iconic theater. And Redford didn't have a volunteer jacket. So everybody was like, anybody have a, a large jacket that he can borrow? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. I gave him my jacket, which means I wasn't in the picture because they wanted all the volunteers to have jackets on. But he did wear my jacket. So, that was
Did you get
actually
it
kind of
back and
cool.
then say, I'm never washing it because Robert Redford wore my jacket?
Well, the funny part is I did have to ask for him to give it back to me. And he looked at me like I had a second head. He was kind of like, I'm Robert Redford. I'm just going to keep this. And I'm like, it gets really cold here, sir. And I work the midnight shift, and I do need that jacket back. And he's like, oh, okay. And he was very nice about it, but he did kind of look at me like I was a little bit crazy at first that I dare ask him for that back. And I watched it probably the next day. I didn't get too crazy about that.
Yeah, yeah, no, that would be silly to do that. But it is true. You worked the Egyptian theater. Do you
Mhm.
still work at that theater?
No, last year they got rid of the midnight shift at the Egyptian, so we moved to the library, a different venue. And this year, ironically, the last year at Park City, uh, and they got rid of it altogether. So the first theater, the iconic theater, uh, they're not going to have it for the last year at Park City, which is really sad. So the last year there,
It's a
Robert
theater,
Redford
right? It's
gone.
still
It
there.
it's a working theater, and they supposedly made some transitions or additions to make
Hmm.
it so it couldn't show film. I think there's a lot more behind that. That's what they said as their statement, and so that's what I know for fact.
Oh, that's kind of sad because that's the theater. You would always have these great stories. You come back for Sundance because you did the midnight showings at the
Yeah,
Egyptian. That's where they showed the quirkier, weirder. That's where you met like really it's eccentric personality, shall we say, like Crispin
absolutely.
Glover, and
Yeah,
yeah. So that's sad, that they're getting
yeah.
rid of, especially since it is such an iconic theater. But I
In the
think the
last year, you
Sundance.
think they would just go one more time, but they
Right,
couldn't
one
do
more
it.
year. I mean, they're going to be moving it, right, to Salt Lake,
Yeah,
so why not? But
or to Boulder, Colorado. Yeah,
oh, is it Boulder? Sorry, I forgot
yeah,
which city won out. It was actually Boulder, not Salt Lake.
yeah.
One other thing I want to mention about Sundance Film Institute, because I know the film
Hmm.
festival gets a lot of crap, and rightfully so, in my opinion,
Yeah, sure.
for having gotten pretty mainstream or, a
Yeah,
little too paparazzi friendly, a little too celebrity-esque, which isn't really on Redford per se, because when he started it, it wasn't like that. It's just become what
yeah,
it's become, right?
yeah.
But the Institute itself continues to give out money for filmmakers to get started, and it's not necessarily related to the film festival. People can apply for those grants, and I've been shocked by the number of like very low budget indie movies I see, whether that's on streaming or in theaters, and you see that Sundance Institute at the end of the movie for financing, and it's a very important vehicle he's created because it's not easy for beginning filmmakers to get their start, and so he didn't have that problem. He was a famous star before he started directing, which we'll talk about in a minute,
Hmm.
because he
Right.
was an actor first. So he didn't have that problem, but I'm sure he recognized being in the industry as long as he is. And also the fact that he started in the 80s, which is really before, in America, that was not exactly a peak period for independent film. It's actually what led to the peak period in the 90s, but the 80s was a very Hollywood period. So I think
Yeah.
it's an important part of his legacy, and in some ways, maybe one of the things he'll be remembered for the most. I'm sure he would like to be remembered for that. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Just and in the beginning, how it kind of turned into this monster, but he kept the institute, the foundation of his kind of dream, and he tried to inject it into the festival at all times while he was there, but it just got even too big for that. And
Yeah.
also the Sundance Labs, I think, is another thing that a lot of people don't know about, where young filmmakers can apply for the labs and work with really established. Uh, people in the industry and help kind of workshop their script and make a film and things like that too.
Another
So they're,
important thing. Yeah, that's
yeah,
great.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, well, great pointing that out. So we're going to move on now to, and I actually kind of feel like I should have reversed this order, but it's okay. We're going to
Yeah.
move on to our next segment, which is Robert Redford as director. And we're going to start with, we picked I feel like two of his best films as director. He didn't
Mhm.
direct anywhere near as much as he acted in, but he did direct a fair amount. But this is probably his most well known film, Ordinary People from 1980. Follows the disintegration of a wealthy family in Lake Forest, Illinois, after one son dies in an accident, and the other son, the younger one, suffers from mental health issues and has a suicide attempt. It stars Donald Sutherland as the father and Mary Tyler Moore in kind of a career-making performance for her, or I shouldn't say making because she was already very famous.
Yeah.
Career-defining performance for her as the icy mother. It was a huge commercial and critical success. It was nominated for 6 Academy Awards and won 4 of those, including Best Picture and Best Director for Robert Redford. Which is a pretty, monumental success for one of the first films you direct. I can't remember. I did
Yeah,
not
not
write in my
bad.
notes if it's his first film or if it
This is first.
first.
As far,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm pretty
So
sure
right
this
out of the
is not
gate, you
bad.
direct your first film and you win a bunch of Oscars. It didn't
Yeah.
keep going like that for him as a director, but he got one. What I
Yeah.
remember, this film, it was a critique of kind of the bourgeois 80s lifestyle. And here, right at 1980, right, there's this wealthy family that are supposed to be the picture perfect family, right? The 2 boys, the mother, and the mother wants to keep it that way. She wants no appearances of anything negative. And one son dying and the other son having mental health issues is not what she's prepared for. The thing I always took away from this film the most, and it's so interesting that she actually did not win the Oscar, Mary Tyler Moore. She definitely deserved to. She was America's sweetheart. She's
Yeah.
coming off of the Mary Tyler Moore show and all of her success as like this happy-go-lucky American woman, and she plays this very different kind of character, this very kind of hard-edged woman who cannot understand failings in other people. Definitely, a narcissistic personality of an nth degree, and so. Of course, there'll be some criticism of the way the mother is portrayed compared to the father. There's that, but just a really powerful movie.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this one. I watched all of these movies yesterday and this morning to kind of refresh.
Always
And
cramming, Brian Hart.
yes,
Did
that's
you watch
right.
them or did you sleep through them? That's always a question I have.
It took me, I don't know how many times it took me to watch, it was All the President's Men. I think I started that one Monday and I kept falling asleep and finally got through it yesterday. But but yeah, this one, yeah, just the difference of Mary Tyler Moore. There were several times where I was just like, oh yeah, that's Mary Tyler Moore.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like she's
Even
so
people our
different.
age who didn't necessarily grow up with her show know that
Yeah,
image she has. But for the people in 1980 that were seeing this for the first time, you have to see it's like coming off of, I don't know. I mean, it'd be like the 90s people coming off of When Harry Met Sally and Meg Ryan's next character, she played a crack addict or something. I don't know. I'm
yeah,
just trying to think of a modern equivalent. That's not very modern either. But yeah, it was very shocking for people to see Mary Tyler Moore in such a way. And Donald Sutherland's character is quite good in this too. He didn't get as much attention. He's the only person on the cast who didn't get a nomination. Which I think is too bad because he's kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. He loves his wife, but I think he wants to support his son, and he doesn't want his son to die like his other son did. He wants to support him, and he understands he's struggling mentally. So it's just a tremendous cast, and I think
yeah.
Robert Redford understood this kind of upper crust white milieu, and he
Hmm.
understood it because he is from, he's in that environment himself, and so he was able to critique it with daggers edges. So I think quite a good movie.
Yeah, and dealing with something like that, when there's probably in this era a lot of epic films, this is just, an ordinary people, ordinary family dealing with grief and turning it a little bit on the stereotype of the mom's the cold one, not the nurturer, and the dad is a little bit more on that role, even though it's a little bit portraying, the mother not in a good light. But back then it was probably very traditional, is, everybody's values that
Hmm.
probably shocked people. Dealing with mental health seems way ahead of its time at that point
Big time, big
for that
time.
film. Yeah. So again, Redford just kind of, giving voices to. It's not like he wrote this film, but he definitely was drawn to it for a reason, and
Yeah, yeah, it's
I'm
based on a
really glad.
book, and I think he was drawn
Yeah.
to the material for sure. So we'll move on to the next film, which is Quiz Show, more than
Mhm.
a decade later. But this was one I really liked when it came out in 1994. I actually saw this in the theaters. I would have been in high school. But it's based on, though, it's a period piece. It's based on the quiz show scandals of the 50s, where they would like fix the quiz shows basically because they wanted certain people to win and didn't want other people to win, or if someone would keep being on a winning
And the
streak.
money.
And the money, yes, of course, always about the money. And there was and it was based on again, it's an adaptation. So the screenplay is another adaptation, which I think is what Redford did a lot of, as opposed to original material. An adaptation of a screenplay that was about a congressional lawyer who was investigating these accusations of game fixing. And so it kind of follows. There's some great actors in this, kind of earlier in their careers. Ray Fiennes, of course, John Turturro's in it. Oh gosh, I should have kept my notes up.
Rob,
Rob
Rob Morrow.
Morrow, of course, who at the
Hmm.
time, which is kind of funny, was kind of one of the bigger actors in the movie because Northern Exposure was such a huge hit. But yeah, just a great, great cast. And again, Redford, because he comes from that acting background, I think the thing, and they say that a lot about directors who were actors first. Kevin Costner gets kind of the same rep that they really know how to direct actors, but it is true in Redford's case. Like you see the Ordinary People and Quiz Show, what you remember about these movies, I think a lot of the times, particularly with Ordinary People, but even with Quiz Show, is the performances.
Yep, absolutely.
And I
He
read
really
it.
lets them like dive into their moment,
Yeah.
and like sit with it and make it powerful themselves. Yeah.
Well, and I read a little quote when I was preparing for the show this morning that Robert Redford, he was preparing this movie when he was making A River Runs Through It, which is about fly fishing. Very different kind of movie with a different kind of pace, very slow. And he's like, when knew he wanted to do a different type of movie altogether. He said he wanted something that was fast paced, a lot more camera movement, so a little higher energy. And I definitely think that. Now, had you seen this movie before?
I haven't seen this one now.
Yeah. So what did
So
you think?
I really enjoyed it. I didn't know much about the story. Obviously, there's always these kind of conspiracy theories or not that things are fixed and seems more relevant even today than not, where we're always having this dialogue. And it's because in the past we've been deceived many times, and it was all about the ratings. It was all about what they could do for that network, that made millions of dollars, sponsorship. It touched on so many things, even kind of like that phenomenon, like I think it's called the beauty premium, that Ralph Fiennes was a better looking, more people could relate, and that's always kind of been an interesting thing that I've thought about in society and how it works. That it's just, beautiful people get special treatment. And this movie kind of delved into that, but not a little bit more subtle. I mean, it was pretty obvious by the end. He talked about, John Turturro talked about getting caps in the seat and things like that, to maybe make
Right.
him more likable.
Right.
But yeah, it really, again, it's kind of ahead of its time. I feel like even in '94, how it really tackles some complex layers that are still relevant today.
Well, and honestly, like it still happens mainly, the thing we think about now, because game shows are still on, but they're not as big as they used to be. It's now
Yeah,
reality TV,
yeah,
reality, where people think it's reality, and a lot of these
yeah,
shows are fixed,
yeah,
right? We're expected to think it's reality. A lot of them are fixed contestants. In fact, I know someone who was a contestant on a reality
yeah.
show. I will keep their name quiet, but it was totally fixed. They were like, they saw it getting fixed. And so it's like, it's totally still the case today that and he's interested in these themes. I think All the President's Men brings that up too. What is shown to the public versus what's really happening behind the scenes. So I think because show's really good. It's kind of hard to find. It is on demand, but it wasn't
Yeah,
free at least on streaming anywhere, which was kind of unfortunate. I was kind of hoping maybe next month, because sometimes in October, now that
yeah,
he's passed, I'm hoping a
yeah.
lot of his films will become more readily available. So now you have our next segment.
Yeah, so now we're going to talk about Robert Redford as an actor, which he's probably more known for even than a director because he became one of Hollywood's biggest icons. And which one am I doing first? Butch Cassidy? Is that right? I can't remember the
Yes, Butch
order of the
Cassidy's
show.
first.
Yes,
Yes.
which is kind of the one that launched him into the stratosphere as an iconic actor. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. It came out in 1969, directed by George Roy Hill. Stars Redford and Paul Newman, who you might have heard of before, also an iconic actor. This one, let's see, 4 Oscars as well. So it won screenplay, original screenplay, cinematography, score, and song. And it's kind of based on a true story. Again, you see a theme as well on these, with two kind of witty outlaws who rob trains and banks, and they're kind of I think at the end of the frontier era, and they're getting they're always on the run. They flee to South America, and they continue to be on the run. What I really like about this film, aside from the fact that he's the Sundance Kid, that's where the name Sundance started, and lived with him forever. My dad actually nicknames me the Kid because of Sundance, and so this all like is kind of extra close to me. But it was a kind of the end of the classic era of westerns, and this was very different. It was kind of going into a transitional phase where spaghetti westerns were coming in. I think they were a little bit before this as well, but it kind of, as far as like the John Wayne and the traditional,
Right.
sweeping western, it's a western, but it is very different. It's more of a buddy film.
Revisionist Western is the title for this. And that became big in the
Yeah,
60s. You had movies like McCabe and Mrs. Miller a little later. This one, Paul Newman did several revisionist Westerns, including Buffalo Bill and the Indians. So they started that in the 60s as critiques of a way of Westerns,
yeah.
or if not total outright critiques, they were definitely not to be taken as seriously. And I think
Yeah.
Butch Cassidy is a good example of that.
I mean, yeah, it's a perfect example. You're playing singing in the rain. You're just having these really kind of back and forth dialogue that's kind of silly but really charming. And that's the other thing. Talk about people that are good looking that you want to root for. Here's two very handsome lead actors that are really bad guys, but you're always kind of rooting for them for some reason. And that's another genre that's always intrigued me, is when you root for the bad guy a little bit. You want them to get away. You don't want them to get caught. And they're doing horrible things. They're killing people. They're robbing people.
Right.
They're not good guys by any means. So kind of the anti-hero, that buddy movie was kind of introduced, with this, and like really gave it some, you know, more films to follow that suit, I feel like.
Well, and of course, started the establishment of Newman and Redford as
Yeah.
friends in real life and then friends on screen. One thing I do want to mention, just as some background that I think is very interesting that I didn't know until I was researching for the show, is that Robert Redford, it seems like overnight success in a way. One of his
Mhm.
first films, Butch Cassidy isn't his first film. I'm not sure his actual first feature film in lead role, but he did do before this Barefoot in the Park in 67, which was a hit, and The Chase in 66, which was also a fairly decent hit. I want to mention though that like he actually started in the earlier 60s acting, quite young, and it was mostly TV and theater. And so he did actually get his chops. I mean, I looked him up on
Mhm.
IMDb and I have pulled it up here. I mean, he was doing small roles in TV shows, Maverick and Tall Story, the deputy, playing, one character on these aren't like these are major TV shows, but he was like on one episode. Playhouse 90, Alfred Hitchcock Presents, Perry Mason. So, I mean, he got his chops the way a lot of actors do, which was, grinding it on TV, doing one appearance, playing one
Yeah.
character, maybe on Perry Mason, a bad guy, or a guy that just, whatever, who knows what.
Yeah.
I haven't seen all those shows, but he did it the same way a lot of working actors do it. It
Yeah.
wasn't like he just walked on with that dazzling good looks and that gorgeous blonde hair and immediately became a star. But once he got a chance to get in movies, he did become a star. And so, and I do think, and I'm, of course, partial to Paul Newman. And so, like,
Yeah.
Paul Newman is so great in Butch Cassidy, and Robert Redford was okay in a way, kind of playing. I mean, he didn't play second fiddle to Paul Newman, but he kind of did. You know what I mean? Because Paul Newman
Well,
just kind of outshone him, I think.
yeah, I think that that's one of his strengths as an actor, is that he is not afraid to let other people shine in the roles. And we'll go into that into the next movie. But he lets people. He doesn't have to like some
Right.
actors that are iconic like want to steal every scene. They want to just like shove their face in it, and they were
Yeah,
both
yeah.
really good playing off of each other, and I think
Oh,
that's why it
sure.
worked.
And I
Yeah.
think maybe he knows, underneath, like Paul Newman is maybe a better actor than me and maybe a little bit more interesting, and I'll let him steal the show. We'll talk about
Yeah.
that on the next film. You want to introduce the one I'm really excited to talk about. One of my favorite films of all time, by the way. So
Yeah, absolutely.
I hope you didn't fall asleep because you thought it was boring. I'm hoping it's just
No,
because you were tired.
no, it was just because, long work week. But no, All the President's Men, 1976, directed by Alan Pakula.
Hmm.
Um, bad names. 4 Oscars as well. It's a true story newsroom thriller about the Washington Post and reporters Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, which stars Robert Redford and Dustin Hoffman, and they uncovering the Watergate scandal. So, and this was very like 2 years after Watergate, so it
Right.
came out
Fairly
really
recent.
quickly. Yeah,
Yeah.
which was interesting that was and I think it was very deliberate to get this out into more people's eyes because unfortunately sometimes we learn about things through cinema, even though it's real life, and we should know about it more through news and newspapers and things like that. But I think they knew that, and yeah, this movie and talk about relevant today. This one is probably more relevant today than it even was back then, and it was super relevant back then.
Yeah.
Just one, it is one of the better movies that I've seen in a long time. To rewatch it was almost like watching it again for the first time, and I fell asleep. I always do that. This, when I finally watched it, it was riveting. Every moment, they really knew how to build tension, just even through silence, and just again letting the camera, like showing them grind on this reporting, and something that I don't see a lot. I know you worked in a newsroom before, so I'd love to hear your take on that. Probably not quite the same as the Washington Post during Watergate, but I love that feel, the clickety clack of the typewriters
Right.
and phone calls with the rotary phone. I mean,
Yeah, no,
it's just
I'm not
so
that
good.
old, so
No,
but these are the kind of movies I watched in journalism school and even in high school journalism that made me want to be a reporter because you watch these movies and like, yeah, I want to be these guys. And it's one of the greatest movies ever made about journalism. It's also one of the greatest movies ever made about defending democracy. I mean, that's
yep,
where it's really relevant to today. At one point, Woodward and Bernstein's editor says to them, nothing writing on this story, guys, just the First Amendment, the Constitution, and possibly our democracy. So,
yeah,
go ahead the way you want. The thing, and we don't have much time left, unfortunately, on this one,
yeah,
but the one thing I want to mention about Redford on this one is even though he's the star and he has a bigger role, actually, in a
yeah,
way, Dustin Hoffman got first billing, and he lets Hoffman really do the Hoffman thing. Hoffman
yeah.
plays the character as a little bit more charisma than
Hmm.
Woodward does. He's and they're yin and yang. Bernstein is kind of the chain smoking Jewish guy who's got a little bit more. He's a little bit more Weasley in the
Yeah,
movie, more underhanded, and
yep.
Woodward is like
Always
more
pushing
above
the
board.
boundaries.
Yeah, but that's why they made a great team because
Yep.
Woodward would be like, "No, we need to get the facts, we need to get it right," and Bernstein would be like, "Yeah, but we got to spice up the story so people want to read it." So great, great, great film.
Yep.
So
Yep.
yeah,
Should be
so
required viewing right now.
I think every American should be requied to see this film. So we'll
Yeah,
leave it with that.
absolutely.
Hats off to you, Brian Hart, for suggesting this, and of course, big hat off to Robert Redford, an icon. We won't have folks like him again anytime soon. And as always, thank you for watching. Have a great day and great movies.